Hi everyone, how's everyone doing? All right, so first thing I'm gonna do, because I'm still very new to this, I just wanna do a quick check just to see if you can, hear and see me over the other side. Just let me know. Just let me know in the chat. I'm looking at my chat here. Just give me an indication that you can hear and you can see me. I'm still just checking here. Can you all hear and see me? Oh, perfect. All right, that's good to hear. So a lot of you coming in just now. Welcome. All right, so I'm just gonna wait a couple of seconds here, a minute or two, just to give people a chance to get into the stream. I'm quite excited for today. I've been promising to do this sort of. Uh, I don't know if it's a meetup or whether it's a talk or whether it's an explanation of something. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's just a very informal chat. And yeah, I'm gonna share a few things that I learned over the years about how to keep myself really focused on doing ML research, and some tricks I learned along the way, some strategies that I use every day. Hey you all, can you all see me? I know some of you must have left already. Sorry about that. Um, just let me know if you can hear me on the. Hey you all, can you all see me? I know some of you must have left already. Yeah. Okay, great. I think this can still happen then in that case. So the thing is, I was trying to, try to set up something here, and then kind of a new setup. I tested it. You know how things go when they go live, they break. So I'm trying to now use Zoom for this one. I was trying to use another software because I really wanted to show you a demo of how I take notes and what kind of software I use and what kind of devices I use as well. So unfortunately, I won't be able to show you all of that, but I can still show you a pretty cool demo still on my desktop, and hopefully that's reasonable and it's pretty close to what I usually do. But I have a couple of slides that I want to share with you. So let me just bring those up, and then I'll share my screen for now. So let's bring this here. Yeah, this is completely new to me, so bear with me, okay? I'm trying to get used to all this. Uh, with screens all over the place, so it's a really new experience for me, but I'm trying my best here. Okay, so I should be able to share my screen now. Actually, in fact, let me just bring this up here. And then we should get started with the talk. It's not a really long talk anyways, but it's just going to take a couple of minutes just to briefly talk about what I wanted to talk about today. Well, still giving me a little bit of issues, but oh man. Okay, it's so weird because I do have a nice setup that I use, but oh, what is going on now? Just give me a second. Yeah. Oh man, something is going on. No, it's not. Oh. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, so okay, so I'm trying to figure out because my computer is just really um, behaving crazy today, but I'm trying to figure out something here because my screen's, my browser is not functioning. Everything is just not functioning, so I cannot move things around how I want to move them. So everything is just chaotic for now. Sorry about that. Um, oh wow, it's just a complete mess. Oh, what is going on with this one? Why is it not allowing me to close? Okay. All right, I think I figured it out. Okay, so are you all there still? Yes, no? Okay, good. Thanks for sticking by. Let me just try to share my screen now and then we should get started, okay? Sorry about all of those things. It's just this computer today is just not really coping with me and it's just messing everything up for me. So let me share my screen now. Okay, and we should be good to go. Okay, so now you should be seeing my screen, right? So I think you're able to see OneNote. Is that okay? Can you see OneNote on my screen? Yep. Okay. Thanks. It really helps when you send me back a response. It lets me know where I am. Okay, so let's get started. So what I wanted to talk about today, as I was saying, I want to talk a little bit about how what's my thought process when I try to inform myself about things related to machine learning, specifically the research side. Obviously, I'm also part of the industry, so I do a little bit of also work on applications, but mostly I'm focused on research side of things. So I always try to keep myself updated and everything happening, and I have different ways and different tools that I use to keep myself informed of the latest machine learning research, and that use all of that, of course, to help out people in the community, to write blogs, to write newsletters, and I do all this educational stuff, which is really helpful for people. But behind that, I need to do a lot of work and inform myself about what's going on, and that's a really tedious task. So over the years, I've tried to basically come up with different ways and how to improve my way of reading papers and taking down notes and doing all that stuff that regular researchers would do. And I have a set of tools that I also use. So anything that I discuss here, by the way, it's not a guarantee that it will work for you. Obviously, everyone has different ways and preferences, and they work with different tools. Not everything is going to work for you that you see here, but these are just some things that have worked for me, and I've kind of tried to optimize my way of doing research and taking down notes and doing all that stuff, because obviously there's a lot going on, and especially with the community, so I really need to be good at this. So the agenda for today will be tools for researchers. Basically, discuss a few tools that I use in hardware stuff, because people were asking me before, okay, what kind of setup do you have? What kind of hardware do you use? And this sort of things. And also resources for staying informed with ML and NLP papers. So what kind of resources I use, what kind of websites I use, and so forth. Okay, and what I'm paying attention to as well when I read a paper. So what are my learning strategies? How I read a paper, what's the structure look like in terms of learning, and how do I pick topics? Right, those topics have to be relevant, and what do I pay attention to? So before I even read anything, before I grab a book, before I go to a panel discussion, before I do anything, I tend to always I always tend to ask myself the question, what do I need to pay attention to? So there's a suggestion here. Please, can you collapse and leave only the notebook with the slide and zoom the notebook view? So let me just try to do something here then. think that's what you're able to see, right? I'm not sure what you were referring to there. Anyways, I'll keep moving. For as long as you can see the slides that I'm showing here, I'm using OneNote, by the way. So as long as you can see the slides, it's totally okay. Then I wanted to do a demo, a live demo, but unfortunately I won't be able to do it using the device that I use. But so I'll try to use the OneNote that I have here on my desktop, which is not the most optimal way, but I still think it's going to be helpful to show a few things. And then there's going to be a discussion Q&A. You can ask your questions while I go along as well. Just feel free to ask questions. And I think a lot of people are here to help as well. So if you have anything that you want to ask, I know a couple of folks here are interested in research as well, and they use their own setups and their own tools. So I think it could be a great way to kind of share as well. Oh, okay. So let me I could just zoom in. Yeah, I've never done a presentation this way. I just wanted to just use OneNote because otherwise I'll be just dealing with a lot of screens. And right now it's just this computer is not really the most optimal. I don't know for what reason. All right, so then have a discussion. I think that would be great as well. So what are the tools I use for doing research? So I tend to use these tools here that you see. As you can see, it's just a very short list. I'm not focusing too much on buying expensive hardware. Well, it's expensive hardware in some way, but I won't buy something too fancy to say. And what I'm mostly interested in is something that's very easy to use. It's going to help me with focus, and also something that's portable because I move around a lot. I do travel a lot. My profession at the moment, which I didn't speak of, and that's not important here, but I'm always traveling all over the place, so I always needed something that's portable. I think for now, I think that's not really that important, but I think as you try to move around a lot and you go back to your offices and so forth, I think it's really good to have a device that you can always carry with you. Spend some time doing the research also on the road. It's a lot of fun doing that. So I said earlier also with the with the preferences, hardware, software. You use all your own softwares. I use these ones, Mendeley for the for jotting down for recording the bib text. That's mostly what I use it for, and I use it for doing some organization of papers. And the OneNote is what you're seeing. This one, I just use it to basically annotate my papers, and that's what I use to read. I do combine it a little bit with Adobe Reader. I like to use Adobe Reader because obviously it's you have the actual PDF. The disadvantage, as you will see in a bit with OneNote, is that when you actually render a PDF on OneNote, you can only get access to a printout, which is just images. You don't get access to the raw PDF, which means you cannot really do searches over that. That's it's kind of a drawback, but I work with that and I do combine it with something like Adobe, and it does help me out a lot. And so I also use so I have an iPad, which I bought like a couple of months back. And, I was not really an Apple kind of guy. I'm just like focused on really, really like traditional, software and hardware as well. Not focusing on too much on fanciness, but I realized that I really need a device that's very, very portable and something that goes along with me easily. And so I decided to make that investment to buy an iPad mini. And I'm not like trying to advocate for Apple any at all here because I'm not really an Apple person, but I think it's a great device. It does its job really well, which is it keeps me focused on what I want to do, right? I don't have many apps installed in it. I just have, the regular apps and the apps for reading and for reading my email, and that's about it. If I want to have something like entertainment, something like YouTube or something like Twitter, that's for another device like my phone. But this device is just mainly for reading, and it really, really, really helps me to focus, which is kind of very important here. Okay, just moving along. Now, these are the resources I use to basically stay informed with ML research. So these ones I've found pretty useful, and I keep the list very short, right? Like I said, one thing I want to do is just keep myself focused, and I kind of go through these ones every day. So I will go through a couple of maybe a couple of pages. I won't go too deep. Like for instance, for archive, I would go maybe last week or something like that, but I won't go too deep on that. And I'm looking around for interesting papers, particularly for NLP and machine learning and those topics that I'm interested in. And I use Archive Sanity. Archive Sanity is just this website. I don't know, lately has been kind of giving issues. It's not working sometimes, it's working sometimes. I don't know what's going on there and who's maintaining it, but it's a really, really nice website. It gives you a good feel for what people are looking at, what people are reading, what people are sharing on social networks, and this sort of things, right? So even though it has this kind of little bias there, I think it's pretty helpful. And I would want to add Reddit to that as well, although Reddit is kind of not a really reliable source, in my opinion. So, but it does help sometimes to find something really interesting. And Twitter has helped me a lot. So Twitter is where I'm mostly active and try to look for interesting papers, at least that maybe past colleagues, maybe people that I'm following, and they're doing a really interesting research that I want to know about. So that's how I kind of stay up to date with those works. Papers with Code, I think, is the one that I really strongly recommend. So Papers with Code and Semantic Scholar, I really love these two. Papers with Code is if you really want to stay up to date with state of the art, which is what that website is about. So it has a lot of papers, new papers are coming in, and it has code, which is great if you want to test out something. And it's all about reproducibility. The code is there. You can give it always a run. So if you don't know about that, check it out. It'll be really, really useful as well in terms of resources. Semantic Scholar, I've started to play like a couple of weeks back, started to play with it. And I really like it because it has this kind of like a recommendation engine, which I didn't see other websites have. And so, I use a combination of these. So the semantic actually uses some kind of semantic search, I guess, to recommend some papers, some related papers to things that I'm following. So I create my own feeds, and it's creating all of this stuff. Always recommending every day, recommending papers for me that are kind of relevant. So it's pretty useful. I really like it. I like where they're going with it, and I like the recommendation engine. And I have it connected with my inbox, so it always sends me really interesting papers that I use to share on Twitter and so forth. So it's really helpful. In terms of, that'll be it. An archive, of course, I manually go to archive, although that's kind of really tedious, obviously, because you go to each category and you will see that you have a ton of categories, right? So I will always just spend a few like minutes on each one of the categories. I would go for like language, for instance, or to computer vision, and then I would just try to keep myself focused on those ones that I'm interested in. But you're going through the list manually is also really helpful, although probably it's not the most optimal way, but I still like doing it because that is what I used to do before anyway. So, but things are getting better. I think the community are building resources for us to inform ourselves about machine learning and what's trending and so forth. So I think there's a lot of tools out there that are really helpful these days. Okay, so to the meat of the talk, I guess, the learning strategies for paper reading. So what I'm going to use here. Oh, made with ML. So someone made a comment, made with ML on the chat. Yeah, I think made with ML is great. So you see a lot of papers, right? You see a lot of notebooks. You see all of these different things that are nicely created by people in the community, which is really great, right? That creation really comes in handy. And I think they found a really nice formula for scaling it, right? I think the scaling part, they're doing well on that end. And I do use it sometimes as well. To find a couple of tools and so forth, and also just to discover things that people are sharing. So it's pretty helpful as well, I guess. Yeah. So the learning strategies for paper reading, what I want to maximize for is just a deeper understanding. When I read a paper, I want to, before reading it, obviously I need to make sure that it's something that's useful for me. And one way I do that quickly was to read the title and then go through the abstract. I think everyone does this, right? But I found over time that abstracts are not the most reliable way of really figuring out whether a paper is interesting or not. Usually what I would do is just make the little extra jump and go into the introduction and try to see how this what's the narrative around the paper. And that usually is really quick for me because I know what I'm looking for. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. What am I paying attention to? Typically, if I want to, for instance, it's a new method or something like that, I would definitely look for those cues in the introduction. And if I don't see it, then if it's poorly written, I know right away, and I can really sense it right away if it's poorly written. If I'm looking just for contribution, something like that, and that's not in the first page or two, then it's obviously not going to be a good read for me. Results, maybe it's about results, and those things need to be really summarized in the first page or two. And this is one way we quickly tell whether a paper is really worth my time. Obviously, there are different ways you can do this, but this is what I use, and it all depends, obviously, on what you're looking for. If you're looking for more like architecture-wise, or maybe architecture aspects of machine learning, maybe this is a different. You'll need a different strategy to figure out what paper works, what paper is worth your time. So one thing I do have emphasized a lot over the years is what, how, and why. I learned this in my PhD the hard way. When I did research, these are the three questions that I used to center myself around the things that I was working on. So what, the how, and the why. What is this about? So what is this paper about? What is the main contribution of this paper? How are they addressing this? Right? What kind of techniques are they using? Those are the things that really help me to pay attention to a paper, whatever I'm looking at, whatever topic. And then why? Why was this proposed? I need to see that like in the first paper, in the first page or two. And typically, good writers and good papers usually have these three things all covered in the abstract and introduction. You will get a feel for it. And once it's there, then you're good to go. You can go into to the next page and so forth. This is the method I use for quality checking. Obviously, again, it all depends on the field itself, but I think in machine learning, this formula has worked really well for me over the years. So I try to optimize for that, and I always maximize myself for deeper understanding for whatever I'm reading. So what did I learn, right? So this is like kind of my anchor point. So what am I learning here? If I read through the first 2 pages and I'm not learning anything, it's time to quit this paper because there's so many other papers that I want to read, or maybe have something interesting that I could read, and I'm just wasting my time. So I always want to know, what am I learning here, and what's my anchor point? So one thing I want to say here is, so this is the time that you spend. This is the point where you're going to spend some time taking notes, right? So you already started to think about taking notes, and taking notes is, I don't know how you read papers, but when I read a paper, even if it's a paper that I'm going to abandon at some point, I always try to write some notes, and I write some questions along the way about what I'm learning and about how this paper is useful for me up to this point, whatever point I was, if I was at the introduction level or whatever. But I'm always writing notes. Even if I abandon it, I always have some notes there. And I use that just to basically help me with recall. Obviously, it all depends on how you read papers and how you take notes and what software you're using. But I think OneNote has helped me a lot with this tremendously. And that's why I've never quit OneNote, because obviously when I'm writing, right, I just write whatever I want to write, the point I want to write, whatever question I'm going to come back to, and I'm keep annotating this along the way. And I always have this for recall, and I always go back to that paper at some point, if it was a paper that I read through all the way. If it was abandoned, then I just categorize that somewhere else. So what did I learn, right? So when you learn something, right, you want to take notes. That helps with recall, as I said, but also I think one recommendation I would give here is to always try to write or try to put it down somewhere, right? Even if it's not on a OneNote page here, but even if it's just on your text editor or something like that, that really helps a lot, because it really helps you to basically test yourself if you're understanding what you're reading. If you're not understanding what you're reading, then I think you're just wasting your time. And I could argue against that you're wasting your time if you don't really understand, if you don't really write it and try to go over it and try to understand it this way. So I always try to write stuff so that you can recall it or later on. The next point I want to make is about, so the one on the right are just reading strategies. So this one is more like a top-down. So what is this about, the top-down? And these are just reading strategies, right? So here I'm focusing on so do I read the paper from introduction all the way to results to, I don't know, the conclusion, or do I go the other way around, or where do I start? I think this all depends on what you're looking for. And this is what I was saying, what are you paying attention to? So for instance, if I'm mostly interested to look at the results, right? Maybe I know this sort of methods or family of methods, maybe you just want to look at the results, and I would just go straight to the table and try to look at the results. Sometimes I don't even need to go to the paper, because websites like Paper with Code already have those results for me in a table, so I could just quickly tell. So this is the reason why I think the community is doing really great with those tools, because they already help you to get an idea of what this paper is about. And that really, really helps you to maximize and to make good use of your time. And so if it's results to methodology, right? So if it's, you're going to look at the results, they are interesting now. Okay, you're curious about, what was tweaked, right? What happened in this architecture? What was the design choice? All this sort of stuff, hyperparameters, whatever. Okay, so that's what you get with ML papers. But you could do it the other way around too. So let's say you're interested in methodology, right? So you want to know what the architecture is about, you're curious about it, and then you go directly to that as opposed to going to the results. So it all depends. So I think the results to methodology, I think it's more like a top-down approach, and the other way will be like, just trying to go. Sorry. So this one would be more from, if you want to go from bottom up or something like that, right? So if you want to go bottom up, I think you maybe want to focus on first introduction, the motivation behind this work, then you go into architecture and so forth. So that's the kind of your bottom up. And this is great for people that are getting started and people that are learning. It's always good to always start with the bottom up. Makes a lot of sense. But for more experienced readers, I guess the top down is something that usually the strategy that you would typically use. So I highlight some along the way. I want to highlight top 5 relevant papers, and this is how I collected my. If you're want to write a paper at some point based on the research and the literature that you're reviewing, you may want to take down notes of these relevant papers, because these are really easy to lose, especially if you're reading a lot of papers. So I think annotation tools like OneNote really helped me with this. I use a different color and I kind of label that. And I won't label all the papers. It's just maybe a paper that I thought was interesting, and I would maybe aim to highlight at least 5 relevant papers. Obviously, this has to be a really good paper, and it has to have really good references. I always go to kind of a skeptic approach. What does this mean? I don't like to use the word skeptic too loosely, but this is something that I've learned in the field, that I want to look at. First of all, when I go to read a paper, I'm always skeptic, about the results. I'm always skeptic about the architecture, the design choices, and so forth. This is what the mentality I always take. It's not about being negative, to be honest. It's more like I think it helps me to kind of open my mind and being very open about what this work is about, and trying to look for faults if there are, and if there are faults, it's just going to help me to figure out whether it makes sense to keep reading this material and so forth. But that has helped me a lot. And how do you take a skeptic approach? Well, ask the questions, right? Ask the tough questions. What is this? Question everything that you see, everything that's confusing you, question it. Maybe it's not that you don't know it. Maybe it's that the author didn't really communicate it well. And this tends to happen a lot with machine learning papers. I'm telling you, it happens a lot. Okay, so I always take that approach. So yeah, this one is more like I label what I don't know. It's like I want to expand my knowledge base. So I would label it and I go back at it. I think I mentioned this before. And then I also label what I know. What does that mean? So, and how do I use this? Again, this goes back to the other point about recall. So I want to label those things that I already know as well. And how, very important here, how does this connect with what I don't know? Because you're trying to create a knowledge base for yourself, right? Somehow you're trying to connect things. And if things are not connecting, you're not going to have a good experience. So, if something is not connecting, maybe it's what you don't know, right? So you label that and you label the things that you don't know, and then you try later on to try to trace it and try to see if there is something there that's missing, or there's some gap here, and why is there a gap, and so forth. So this is a good approach, I think, to make the most use out of your reading time and try to understand a machine learning paper. I think these are things that could generalize pretty easily to other domains as well. But I'm talking about the context of machine learning here, obviously. So any questions so far? Any questions from your end? Ask away, okay? This is the time to ask away. Anything? Any questions? Okay, so one question here from Money. So how are you able to connect with what you already know? Yeah. So okay. So great question, right? So this is related to the second points there. So I think when you're kind of reading a paper, right? um, I think you already know some stuff. Yeah, you should know some stuff. Otherwise, reading a paper probably is not the best place to start. Maybe it's even reading a book or even reading a survey paper or something like that, right? So I'm assuming here you already have some knowledge base that you can ground yourself on whatever you're learning. So you will always, try to annotate the stuff that you already know. So those stuff will probably be highlighted when you're annotating your paper, right? So you would have those like maybe in a color, in a specific color, maybe some phrases or something like that resonates with you or something that you know. And you don't have to do it by the way, but I'm saying it's really helpful when you want to connect something with something else. Because what I've learned is that when I do that kind of annotation, and I go back and try to read the paper up again, because obviously I go through it a couple of times. Um, at, at some point, that point was there, and I made that connection. That connection is not so obvious. That's the reason why I make the point here. But it starts to become more obvious as you go over the paper again, because you already have those highlighted, and you already have that in your mind that at some point maybe this is somehow connected to something else because I've actually annotated and it was important for me somehow. So you're kind of taking a gamble here, but what I'm saying is that those methods are really good for recall anyway. So even if you cannot really connect the dots with something that you don't understand in the paper, it's there for recall. So this is kind of part of the recall part that I was talking about. Okay, so really good questions here. Let's see. Wow, so much good questions. So I've seen again all of these things, right? Take them with a grain of salt. These are not things that are gonna generalize or are gonna work for everyone. This is what has worked for me. I'm just sharing my experience from my point of view. So maybe some of these things could not work for you, but just take it with a grain of salt. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, the other question is, I've seen that you use different colors when underlining the papers. Is there any rule of thumb you use for the colors? So I don't know if you have noticed, but a lot of people are starting to kind of put out this annotated papers and this sort of things in our community. And that's great, I think, because it shows that people are actually using these strategies, right? These kind of different colors and all these different drawings there to help guide whatever you are reading. So it actually is really, really effective. And some people, of course, are more like on the visual side of things, like me. I'm always trying to draw or make scribble something. And this is connected with the colors you use, and the colors is all up to you how you wanna choose it. But I do tend to use like the yellow color is something that maybe is of interest for me, or maybe it's something that when I go over back again through this paper, those are the things that I probably will take a look at. And so one strategy that I do use, I try not to use too much of the yellow, although sometimes I would use a lot of the yellow. So I would always have like this thing where it has to be a little bit spread out. If it's I was continuously doing this in a paragraph, this yellow kind of highlighting, I think it's just a distraction at this point. So I always try to strategize. Don't try to abuse it too much when you're annotating the paper, and that's how I would generally use it. So the colors again is just what you prefer, but yellow is something that I use to kind of call my attention. That's why I use the yellow here. It's just to highlight something that I thought was really really useful or something new there that really resonated with me. But yeah, there are other ways you can. So I would maybe use. So I like to use the red. Obviously, red is more like for danger, right? I don't want to talk about that philosophical part of thing, but I think the red is really great because it tells you, okay, warning, something's happening here. Maybe I'm not understanding something. I would use that. It's unfortunate I don't have an example. That's what I wanted to show, but red is a really good color to point out something maybe that you didn't understand, or maybe a huge question mark there. So when you're preparing a paper, how do you prepare the state of art? I didn't understand the question, to be honest. Maybe you can rephrase that question, Goberni. Maybe that will help me a little bit. Yes, iterating and coming back again helps. I strongly agree with this point. I think spending all that effort and that work trying to figure out what paper is useful for you and what's not, all that filters that you apply really makes sense because obviously if a paper really does make it through your filter, I think it's worth reading again, right? There's a reason why you actually chose the paper. Maybe the first time it wasn't so obvious, but it doesn't mean that it's not helpful. It means maybe that you really didn't understood something, and that's the reason why I think it's really good to label whether how many question marks you're going to have there. It's going to really determine whether it's actually the reason why the paper is not good, or maybe because you didn't understand something. So that's why I think annotation is pretty handy because of that, because you can ask questions and you can tell yourself whether it was you, whether it was the paper, or whether there's something that wasn't explained so well. Most of ML papers have mathematical equations. How do you help yourself to understand those maths? This is a really, really, really great question. So when we have our paper discussions, I think people come mostly to try to understand the math. Most people actually understand papers, and we try not to choose papers with too much math, because I think it scares people a lot. But it goes back to that question that point that I made earlier, right? So the top-down approach. If you are basically a beginner of reading ML papers, and maybe you don't have like a strong background, like I would suggest trying to use the bottom-up approach. If you're jump into results, jump to methodology ahead of time without even going through each one of the steps of the paper, this will lose you entirely. So in order to understand math, what I will typically do, so this is the reason why I love when the community kind of plays these rules and these policies to actually put code along with papers. And that's one of my filters, actually. If a paper doesn't have code, it's more than likely I'm not going to read it, unless it's a paper like on opinion piece or something like that. It has to have code. That's one of my filters, because if I do, and most good papers have code today, which is really wonderful, and I'm really glad the community has pushed for that. Most conferences have pushed for that, and that's really helpful, because if you don't understand something, maybe some math wasn't clear, the code will be your single source of truth. The code will explain to you what's going on there. Maybe there's some kind of variant of a loss function. Maybe there's something that was done. Maybe some normalization on the data. Something was done that was represented mathematically, and maybe the code can help you associate that. I think in my opinion, there's no really easy way to, unless you really have like a heavy math background, there's no really easy way or shortcut, I believe, to understand what the math is saying. So I think the code is one of the ways that you would test for this. Yeah, hopefully that's useful. For undergrad and ML newbies, how do you recommend to read papers if we're entirely new in the field? I've tried to read some papers where I have no clue about like a half of what it's written. I guess, right, Maria? I guess that's the reason why you came here. I don't have a straightforward answer to this one. What I would say is, I would recommend, if you're a beginner, I would strongly recommend you to always start with survey papers. There's a reason why survey papers are there. Obviously, survey papers are more like high level. They don't give you too many details. In fact, they don't even have math, right? They don't have any math. They don't explain. The design choices for some architecture or anything like that. They don't really go that deep. But I think getting a sense, for what matters in the field, I think this is a really good way to do it. And I think I remember really well when I started as a researcher. When I started with my master's, that's when I started research. Because in my undergrad, I didn't really do that much research. I wasn't interested. But one thing that really helped me out was books. I read a lot of books. I think books are really great. They're kind of undervalued for some reason, but there's a lot of books, for instance, books about text mining, books about data mining, all of these concepts. By the way, that's how we used to call it before. Some professors could tell you about that, like older professors could tell you that it was data mining, then it became data science, and it's a lot of names. It has transformed over the years. But anyways, going back to that point I was making, I think it's always good to check what the history was, at least for what you were interested in. So if, for instance, in my case, I was interested in NLP. I was so fortunate because I got recommended from my advisors and my professors to go to those books. So there's a couple of books that were recommended, and I was go through those books and try to do exercises, and it really created a really nice foundation for me. Before I even started to read papers, of course, before I even started to explore, and that really helped me out. Because obviously, I know what I know what mattered at the end of the day when I went through the book, and maybe even the book had some kind of references as well that I used. And if you notice, if you go through those books, you will see that those books actually refer to a lot of survey papers. And this is how I ended up with survey papers as a next step. So survey papers, I couldn't emphasize more. If you really want to know about survey papers, I do share a lot of survey papers, although I don't think I share enough. But if you use things like Semantic Scholar, they have really good recommendation engine. All you do is just type survey, and it will create this kind of feed for you where you will see a lot of survey papers and new survey papers, old survey papers, and journals have this a lot, right? Obviously, journals. If you're only emphasizing on conferences do not have this type of papers. It's mostly journals. And obviously archive. Wow, so many questions. I'll try to, let me see, I have maybe 10 more minutes. I want to do like a quick demo of how I annotate, although this will be a pretty lame demo. I will feel bad after doing this demo, but I'll try it. And it's on my desktop. I'll probably have to use my cursor here and everything, but let's see if this works. But I want to show you, I'll take 5 minutes of the time to show you how I go about reading the paper, just to give you a demo. Let me take one or two questions here more, and then I'll do that. So one good question here from Mark: do you follow summarization type of media, such as Yannick Kilcher YouTube channel? And if so, do you have a few recommendations? So this is a great question, because obviously there's so much different options, right? So you have papers, you have, like I said, those websites that summarize statistics for you about papers, which is really great, has helped me out a lot. And then you have media, right? So you have like YouTube videos, then you even have like shorter videos, you have long form videos, you have all these different kind of things. I think it all depends on what what you prefer as a medium to learn. I think most people, I guess, like visual explanations. They like, that explanation really makes sense to them, as opposed to reading a paper. I think those are really great, by the way. I'm not too familiar with I know Yannick, I've seen one or two videos, but I'm not so sure about the entirety of what he produces. But I guess having that as maybe as a way to kind of get a quick overview, so to speak, of what the paper is about, I think it's pretty reasonable to do that. And let's use what we have. Those resources are there for a reason, and people are spending their valuable time to do it. And you always try to see for quality, right? If there's something that maybe, if someone is claiming that they want to explain something to you and you didn't understand it after their explanation, then those are supposed to be red flags. If you understand it, maybe didn't understand something, maybe because you missed something, or maybe you need to create more background knowledge for you or something like that. Maybe you need to focus on other kinds of mediums, maybe survey papers, maybe other stuff that I was mentioning. Yeah, but there's no straightforward answer again. But I think having videos is really great. Even myself, I want to do videos as well to help out people. Right, so there's a question here from Bhavani. Hopefully I say the name right. I'm sorry if I didn't get your name right. I'm poor with names. I should be better with names, because I'm actually a trainer, an educator by profession, but I struggle. Sorry about that. So when you read a paper and it refers to a bunch of other papers, should you read all of them to get context? For example, attention before transformers. This is such a great question. So many great questions here. I think I'm going to take a log of this and maybe try to expound, or maybe even refer to these questions at some point, maybe through a blog or my Twitter feed. But this one is great, because this one is something that I'm trying to build a solution for. And I think it's really helpful to give people some kind of guidance, an easier guidance. And this goes back to the medium part that I was saying. Maybe people don't want to read a survey paper because it's a very lengthy paper, maybe. Or maybe all they want is just like a short list, right? Items of papers, maybe, that they want to go through, that really helps them to understand a particular, maybe, architecture or something like that, like in this case, transformer. So I think websites like Papers with Code, they actually have like a new feature. I think it's called methods, and that's what they're aiming to do. So they want to give you this history of different architectures and what it was used for. I think it's so helpful, right? It tells you like what task it's used for and how it has evolved and what new methods came along the way, and how we ended up with transformers. Obviously, there's some improvement to be made there because you can actually improve the storyline and give people more information there. But I think that's a really good first step, and those resources do help to create a better medium for you to go through, to understand what came before what. Okay, so Jack is actually putting me on the spot. So can you show how you transition from paper to understanding code with a live example? So that's what I want to do later on. This is why I wanted to test the stream today. It's kind of like a test as well, because that's something that I want to try. So I want to try different techniques, and I think I promised our paper discussion group that I wanted to do more live coding because I think it makes sense. I mean, I think for people, they're afraid of getting into the code. That's totally understandable if you're starting. But I think there are ways you can actually do this, and you don't want to start with a really hard example, a really hard paper. You want to start with something that's simple, right? You don't want to start with a transformers, for instance, because you're going to get lost completely. And that if you're not aware of these techniques, like the history of it and how transformer came to be, you're going to get lost pretty quickly. So try to start with a very basic method. I think try to do something like Word2Vec, which is a very simple paper, and there's so many code examples out there, and try to understand a few concepts. That I think that helps a lot. I think that's how you would go about, and this usually does help, and that's what I usually recommend. Yeah, so I'm going to try to do more of these, but I'm going to basically try to do basic examples, then move on to more advanced examples. What is your reading strategy for writing the literature review of your articles? It's more about writing. It's not about reading. I think the question is more about writing. So this could be another talk maybe or something like that about writing, because I love trying to follow best practices for writing. That's something that I always try to find good writers online, and I follow them, and I follow the strategies, and I've used that over the years, to improve my writing. And I think in the last talk I suggested a few people that I do follow for that. And writing is so important, right? It's communication of machine learning ideas is so important because you can easily make a lot of mistakes and use language that you shouldn't. But that I think will be another talk. Good idea there. Wow, so many questions here. Sentence your co-author based on background. Right, I think that's more about writing. Okay, so let me do a quick example here, and let's see how this goes. I hope. Okay, so I have a paper here, which I hope you can see it. Can you see it? I think you can see it, right? So imagine I want to look at this paper. Now, I'll be very honest. I know a little bit about transformers, right? I know a little bit about language modeling, right? What am I paying attention to? That's the first question I said, right? And I want to emphasize on those things as a strategy that I use. Your strategy may be a little bit different, but I think the good first question is, what do I want to pay attention to? Well, according to the title of this paper is Transformer for Longer Sequences. I think I want to read this paper because I think longer sequences is something that I think most architectures that have been proposed in the field of NLP have struggled to deal with longer sequences, such as books and so forth. So what am I looking for? Well, if it's longer sequences, I want to know, why is this an issue? Why is longer sequences an issue? First of all, right? I want to know if the author actually is talking about these points. And the second question would be here is complexity, time complexity, because I have that background already and I know that's an issue, right? So there's a kind of like a constraint with attention mechanism. So attention mechanism has this like linear complexity, but I have that background. Now, if you were coming straight to this paper and you were like, what is this? What is, okay, Transformers for Lexicons, it sounds cool. I mean, it's a really good name, right? It's really kind of like a little big bird. I think it's an attractive name. But yeah, you will be a little bit lost, right? So that was good to ask. Why do I come here? What's the motivation for coming here? And then the abstract, of course, it needs to tell me the story that I want to see, which is, if you look at it, I haven't really looked deep into this paper, although I've just kind of skimmed it. This paper is already talking about complexity. It may scare you, but the author is actually making a point right away that that's something that's important for them. And that's important for me as a reader here, because that's what I want to focus on in terms of what I'm reading. And so that's a good indicator for me. And obviously, I like the example of various NLP tasks such as question answering and summarization. That really gives me a good indication as well that maybe this author is maybe going to consider some examples or maybe want to explain something. I think those examples will be great. And you can see a mention of hardware as well here. The unfortunate thing is because I'm not using, you can see here hardware, right? This one, what I'm looking at. I want to maybe look for some discussion around. I want to know how this applies, at least in the context of one of those tasks, right? That's very important for me to get a good understanding. So at least for this paper, that's what I want to focus on. I want to focus on the complexity. I want to focus on what are the what are the benefits in terms of the hardware aspect of it and the question answering and then some application of it. These are the three things that I want to focus on. And so I go and I try to reduce summary and components. That's what I want to pay attention to. And so my approach for this will be more like a top-down because obviously I know a little bit about transformers. I already said that, right? So what I would typically do is try to see if there's some results. Okay, so let me try to see. By the way, if you notice how I use my OneNote here is kind of weird because actually OneNote is not, I have it kind of in the center because I always do, I do take notes this side and I take notes this side. I don't like to just take on notes on one side. I think that doesn't work for me. I want to do on both sides. Okay, so if I go a little bit down, let's see if I can find some sort of related work. There's a little bit about architecture, but I'm interested in the results. I want to see right away what were the tests, what are the experiments, because that's going to tell me whether I will find what I'm looking for, right? So let me see. Let's see. Like you can tell I haven't really looked really closely at this paper, but I'm trying to look for that information. It's kind of a little bit slow. Desktop is not the most optimal one. So I think we have some results here, I guess. These are some results. Yeah, some experiments, right? So this is your experiments right here. Maybe use a different color for that. Right. So let's see the results that I'm interested in. Oh, I already see something really interesting here. So maybe that I will highlight it with, right. So the TF-IDF. What's the point of that? But I'm not going to touch on that. I'm not going to go deeper on that because that's not the point of going through all this. I want to focus on the results and see what the results are and what kind of maybe tasks or benchmarks, whatever this was tested on. So that's the first thing I want to know. Okay, so I go directly into the data set. So there are a couple of data sets that were used, right? So the stores, Wikipedia, blah, blah, blah. But I still don't see anything about tasks. And that's a little bit not good news for me. But let's see, let's keep going. Maybe there are some, okay, now we see it. So we have the HotPot QA, we have the Natural IQ, all of these ones. If you look at those transformer-based papers, the language modelings, you always have these as benchmarks that are used. This one is like QA task, right? And these ones are more difficult QA kind of benchmarks as well. And then you have the WikiHub, which is more about, I think it's more of question answering as well. So all of these are related to question answering apparently. So it looks like, okay, question answering is great. That's what I came here for. I want to know a little bit about it. And let's look at some results really quickly. So you can see here, if I'm really analyzing the results, I just want to, let's see how those results compare to whatever was proposed before. I'm still not interested in these ones yet because I just want to know, my question was whether it has anything related to those tasks that I was interested in. Apparently it does. So I would read a little bit here and try to understand, what's going on, what the results, how they compare, what's the improvement, and so forth. And this will give me some kind of indicators whether it makes sense for me to actually go through the theoretical analysis of the paper or the architecture itself. Because again, I took a top-down approach. Maybe your approach is going to be a little bit different if you're a beginner, but maybe for someone that's more experienced, those are the things that you would generally do. And obviously, I understand here this is about question answering. There's more like other comparison here with base models. You can see here base size models and some reports some accuracy and support. They're using this kind of metric. Right, and it's mostly about QA apparently. Okay, so they have document classification as well. And they probably use something like the CLS token from BERT. But I'm just kind of skimming, right? Just skimming this. And I'm making some annotations as I go. not too sure what that is, so I'm gonna, maybe that it's not so clear for me. Just gonna put a question mark. What does that mean? Encoder decoder task. I'm gonna come back to that. That phrase right there is not so obvious to me what it is, but I will go back to that. I know what an encoder decoder is, but I don't know what it means in that context. Okay, so there's a little bit of summarization, right? I discussed earlier. So the author actually wrote this paper really well. That's what I love. I love when people do that because, they don't mislead you. They tell you that they're going to talk about this, and they do talk about it, and they present it in the paper. And those are really good, I think, good components of what makes a really good paper. You don't mislead. That's about writing, right? Don't mislead. And there's even more about genomics here, which is really surprising and interesting as well. The genomics part of it. Maybe there's some conversation here, which may be interesting. Maybe conversations, because I know genomics data is a little bit more complex than our usual NLP benchmarks. So maybe I could ask something here about, maybe ask a question here. What's the length of a typical data set related to genomics? And why did they explore it here? So you can see here DNA sequence 32K. Okay. And those are the things, right? Those are the things that I'm combining. I keep skimming, and I'm on the conclusion already. And I guess there's some kind of more explanations, maybe even some math towards the end. And that's what I would do, right? So I think it's always important to ask the question, right? What do you want to pay attention to? And I think as an experienced researcher, maybe that really helps you to get a feel for whether this paper makes sense or not. And that's what I do. I don't try to use like popularity as a filter. I think that's not a good measure. Maybe it's coming from a popular research lab, and I think that's a good measurement for, for deciding whether a paper makes sense for you or it's worth your time. But I think asking yourself and be really curious, I think that's a good strategy overall. And that's, I think, a good approach. I would argue it's a good approach. Okay, so any other questions? I mean, I couldn't like show you because I have my pen and my other stuff on the side, and I just something went on with it. It just wasn't working. I really wish I could show you, but one thing I would say, I just want to make the announcement that I will do more of this. So I will do this very often, because I will start this kind of. I'm gonna use YouTube for doing live streaming. I'll do live stream of paper explanations, and I'm gonna do it. The first few explanations will be more for like beginners, people that are beginning. They want to get into the space. I want to make it more beginner friendly, and I think it's gonna be useful even for people that are, have a little bit of maybe some progress already. So I think it's still gonna be useful. And so I'm gonna build up like this, and I'm gonna create this kind of content, and eventually I will do more advanced paper like this one. And along the way, obviously, I will share a few things that I think were important and useful too as well. No, it's not a butter. I always do the zooming out. That's why I have it on the. That doesn't bother me. Again, it all depends on you. Maybe this is bothering you, right? But for me, I'm always focused, and I want to make sure I use a device that I don't have notifications and I have other distractions. It's just me on open OneNote, and I'm just writing, and I like I said, I annotate here and I annotate here. I just interact with this stuff. Like, I think interaction, just doing this kind of interaction with the paper and writing notes and annotating is just helping me to remember stuff and helping me to really get what I want from this, whatever I'm reading. So I think it helps me a lot. I love it. Maybe it's not a good experience for you, but I like it. Yeah, I mean, searching papers, this sort of things. Yeah, I wanna do more of that as well. I think that would be really useful for this community. Starting with very basic papers, maybe like those things like word to back, and then building up. So I'm gonna definitely use tools like methods from Papers with Code, because I think that would be easy for me to follow as a recipe. And then just build up some knowledge, build up maybe record a few videos doing this sort of paper explanations, and just showing you my thought process and how I go about reading this, because I do this a lot. I do this every day, to be honest, because I need to do it, and it's part of kind of my job as well. And And I do this because I'm very passionate to help the community and educate the community as well on certain aspects of the field. So I'm very devoted to this. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna take notes. I'm taking notes. All of this stuff I'm gonna log. I'm gonna write some notes on the side. I'll definitely try to write more or do more of these kind of live streams. Unfortunately, today something went wrong at the beginning, right? Apologies for that. But I'm experimenting with this. I'm pretty new to all of this. So thanks for being with me. Yeah, so thanks very much, everyone. I guess that would be it. If you have any other questions, just let me know. I'll stick by maybe for an extra 5 minutes because I need to go to another. I need to go to another meeting now. Okay. See you soon.